dark and stormy night, crafties. The kind of night that makes you question everything. The kind of night which makes you lie in your bed and think, what kind of person am I? Lightning was lancing across the sky. Thunder was breaking up the heavens. Flashes of black and white everywhere. And next thing we knew, Covert Go Blue went dark. One moment, content streaming into the ether. Streak 24/7. And next, nothing. However, today, the Arjuna Man and the CGB have gone to great lengths, and we have discovered the hiding place. We've brought him up from the underground. Covert Go Blue, are you still alive, man?
I am. Do you recognize my voice coming through this ancient device known to some as the phone?
That's some 20th century technology right there, CGB.
I am calling into my own show. It's a humbling experience, and the red mages gave it their best shot. They cast God knows how many lightning bolts, but I'm still here.
He's still kicking. His life gain is online, and so is his voice. And CGB, I'm stoked to have you with us today because we are going to do a deep dive in what is, I believe, your favorite format at the moment, Standard 2022. So we're like really getting a sense of what's going on with this format. And it's also giving us a really good forecast for what the next standard format is going to look like. And I think that we've got enough reps under our belt that we can start to make some conjecture about what's going to be good. So yeah, really, really stoked to jump into that. First of all, CGB, like, how has your week been, man?
Thanks for asking. Oh, man. Yeah, everything was going great. Had a really awesome stream on Tuesday where I literally thought my YouTube channel got deleted, and we researched that bug on air in front of everybody. My videos were just gone. Don't know, but fixed it. Found the solution. It was a glitch. We solved, my beautiful community and I solved the issue before Gordon Ramsay's official YouTube channel did. So
okay. glad to hear that.
Yeah, I haven't checked on Gordo in a bit. I hope he got his YouTube videos back up, but we got ours back, so that was nice. But then that night we go to Team Degenerate Gaming. My wife and I are both a member of MTG Nerd Girl's new esports endeavor, Degenerate Gaming.
Which, by the way, is awesome.
It is. I don't want to put too many words in her mouth, but the idea is like it's an esports team focused around community and getting focused on sponsors and sponsorships that make sense for the Magic the Gathering space. And she's doing a great job. So I'm really excited about doing it. And we were doing our first stream team community night, or our second one actually. And we were playing Don't Starve, and then the power just goes out. It's gone. And my wife and I are erased from the Don't Starve universe.
Oh,
so
goodness.
I'm going to try to do the Cliff Notes version. This is really hard. We found out the next day that we weren't supposed to get power back until Friday, and this was like a Wednesday morning. So it's like, well, that's not going to do.
That's a lot of time.
Yep. That's a lot of time. These videos got to get made. So packed up the whole office setup and drove like 2 hours south to a town called Gladwin, went into the in-laws' summer cottage basement and set up down there. One of the monitors did not survive. An Alienware $350 monitor was shattered in this cross-country trip.
Brutal.
Yeah, absolutely brutal. And then we got a message. This was, I think, Thursday. Was it Friday morning or sometime Thursday? We got a message that power had been restored. So it's like, great. Pack everything back up, head back up, get home. Now, when we left, there was a tree that had fallen on the power line next to our house. So I called and reported it. When we got back, the tree was gone, but the power lines were lying on the ground. and the power was on.
Whoa.
That,
Okay.
that's not okay. Like serious.
Okay,
Like in front of
cool.
my house, there are live power lines on the ground and
On the
in the
ground.
trees. Yeah,
Just
yeah,
just waiting for some beaver to come along and
yep,
frickin' chew him up.
yep. So
That's
also,
amazing.
yeah. So I call power company and report that because I think I should. Makes sense, right? You would do this too. This is the play,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, didn't hear anything back from them. So the next day, it's still like that. So I tweet at Consumers Energy, something I've never done before, angry tweeted. And they say again, we're going to send somebody. I'm like, okay, cool. And I like stress to them, by the way, the power is on and these are power lines on the ground. Not a big deal. And I didn't even say that in the public tweet. I said that in the private message because I didn't want like their stuff to blow up.
Yeah.
So I get a message at like 8 a.m. that our service person came out. So I get up, I head outside. The power lines are back up on the poles. There are 4 lines. Okay, 3 of them I assume do energy things, and one I am to find out from this experience is the cable and the internet. The 3 lines are back up on the pole. So somebody came out, put them back up. The cable internet line has been cut in half and left rolled up on the side of the road with a note attached to it that says "call cable."
Call cable. Oh my god.
So now I have power but no internet, which is like,
Oh my
wait, which
god,
of these
dude.
things is even more important anymore?
Yeah. That is something.
And I'm told I won't be visited by the cable company until Wednesday. And it is currently Saturday, and I don't have enough stuff recorded to get that far. So I'm back to like, do I have to go back to in-law basement dojo, rent a room at a library? Oh my god, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare.
So what you're telling me is that you came home to find a trail of crumbs in play, but no food tokens.
I mean, is that really the saddest analogy you could come up with in Magic? I'm holding 3 deadly disputes, and I've got no artifacts or creatures, bro.
Yep.
Bro.
Brutal.
Sad.
Brutal.
I got 3 Temple of Dragon Queens and no dragons.
Well, I mean, I think that it is always the times of greatest duress in which we find our resourcefulness, right? And so that's exactly what you're doing. CGB has like literally driven like half an hour to get set up to record this show. And so you're killing it, man. Just, iron will,
Well,
unstoppable.
just one more thing about that. I went to the library to use their internet, but they're closing. They're closing. They just closed. So I am on a picnic table outside the library using the internet, calling and doing this show because Arjun, I love you, man. That's the only
Dude,
reason. It's the only reason.
I'm feeling it today. Sometimes you gotta, crawl in the mud for a couple miles to prove to someone that you love them. And I really feel that, CGB. So
Nice.
I love you too, man.
I'm
And
also excited to talk about Standard 2022 because we don't have anything new in historic Brawl to talk about because
yes,
they were just like, not today. Wizards was like,
no,
nope, we're not doing that this week either.
not today, suckers. And yeah, I think like I'm sure that there are things that we could discuss related to like 100 card historic brawl and Adventures of the Forgotten Realms and blah 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 blah. But honestly, I don't know, like how much of that format have you been playing this last week, CGB? Like, have you been on it, or are you still on standard?
I mean, I've only played Standard 2022 for what seems like about a month now.
Yeah,
Historic Brawl, it's like there's going to be new cards.
yeah,
I mean, that is the thing, right? You're excited that it's back, but do we want to
yeah,
play it with when we know there's going to be new cards in 2 weeks? Not as
yeah.
much. And
That's it.
And to be honest, like Standard 2022, like thank God for this format,
Hmm.
it really has saved Magic for the last month or so for me because it is really fun.
It is. It is. So yes, I am stoked. And we've had like I feel like we've had people just kind of curious about like we've kind of hinted here and there. I had like a 10-minute conversation or whatever. But I feel like it's just really time to like get into it. You know what I mean? I want to get into the nitty gritty of this format, like brewing for it, the thought processes, like some of our deeper thoughts on the meta, not just to help people survive in this particular format, but again to just like give people some of the more foundational concepts that they can take forward to improve their own game. So, and I actually, I wanted to read a lightning round question related to this, which I think will, just kind of get us into this a little
Whoa,
bit more.
whoa, 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 whoa. Does it have to be called lightning round? I'm getting, I have some
Some
PTSD. I'm
PTSD.
getting triggered here.
Okay, we'll call it shock. How about that?
Not helpful either. All right. But go on, go on.
Okay, I thought that I had my question here, but I'm actually
Next time when I try to be funny, use the window to do the research portion.
I
It'll
was
go
trying.
together well.
I was
Okay,
trying.
okay,
I was trying.
okay.
Okay. So here's the question. So Hank Sandwich asks, I reckon you guys have already got this planned, but once the 2022 meta is more clearly defined, could we get some deep deck text discussing optimal play patterns, the way the deck can interact with other popular decks, etc.? And I guess by extension, you'd learn how to exploit the deck's weaknesses when matched against it. Or is it better to wait until September rolls around and we've got the full set? Not sure if it's fit for the podcast or maybe CGB's channel, etc. So yes, Hank Sandwich, this is an excellent question, and this is exactly what we're going to dive into today. So all right, Covert Go Blue.
Mm-hmm.
I want to like I want to just give like a quick overview of what I've been doing in the format. And then we can get an update from what you've been doing in the format, and then we can dive in. So I've been back on my Simic. And dude, like, I was worried that this deck was going to be outmoded in the format. I've been crushing with it. I think probably like 65% win rate. I thought that these Orzhov decks were going to be the bane of my existence. I've been crushing them. I think that this deck is real. I actually think that it's one of the pillars of the format, and I think that people are sleeping on it at their peril. And, I don't often come out and say that, like, this deck is really good. People aren't playing it. They should be playing it. But I'm staking my reputation on this.
Okay.
I think that this deck is real. And I think that if people aren't playing it or are not prepared for it, I think that they are losing equity.
The to be your hype dude for a moment, to be your hype bro. The last two times you did this were Teamer Adventures post the Euro ban, I think, or maybe right before the Euro ban, and Sultai Ultimatum right after Kaldheim was released. So the last two times you've been like, pay attention to this. You've been very right.
I appreciate that, CGB. I very much do. Now, again, I think that it is good to note that, as Hank Sandwich mentioned in that question, all of this could end up being invalidated by Midnight Hunt. So this is kind of like, this is what we know now. And it could be possible that like a new cycle of lands combined with like some very, very powerful creatures, perhaps, or whatever, like, this set, I'm really hoping that this is not going to be the next Eldraine. So let's go on record for saying that I'm a little worried about that. So if this set ends up being more of an Eldraine than, say, like a Zendikar Rising or a Kaldheim or an Adventures of the Forgotten Realms, then it could be very, very different. But as the meta currently stands, yes, I do think that Simic Ramp is a real archetype and a pillar of the format.
All right, what does it do? What does it do that puts it there, in your opinion? Like, what does it have over the format?
Okay. So one of the things it has is that you just get to play more powerful 7-drop cards than any other deck in the format. And they actually make sense in your deck. So let's talk about Cyclone Summoner, which is a really key part of this deck. This card was basically a total meme in regular standard. And that's just because it's like Cute summoner, bro. I have Embercleave, I have Ultimatum, I have Rogues. Like, none of these decks give basically a flying flip about Cyclone Summoner. Cyclone Summoner is really, I would call it like, it's powerful in the traditional sense of what that meant in Magic, where like it's a big creature that has a big effect when it enters the battlefield. But that's basically not mattered in modern standard. We've just had more powerful things to be doing, basically. But in a powered down format like Standard 2022, the ability to just reset the board can be totally game changing. And I think that one of the things you might miss about the asymmetricality of this effect is that, okay, if you have 7 mana and your opponent has 7 mana and you cast one of these, okay, it's kind of big. You start with a 7/7, they need to rebuild their board, whatever, okay? But I think that what a lot of people don't anticipate is that you're spending you might like put 2 extra lands into play in your first handful of turns. And especially like if you're on the play, you might drop Cyclone Summoner and your opponent only has 3 or 4 lands, right? And so they're left in this position where like next turn you're going to untap with 7 or 8 lands. And like they have to take their turn and either try to deal with your giant or start to get some stuff back on the board. And so when you untap with all of your lands, you have all of that mana to interact with their stuff or to cast an Alrund's Epiphany or even to just leave up something like Divide by Zero so that for their next turn, you have interaction, they can't deal with your giant, whatever. So I think that that's something that needs to be really emphasized about this deck is that not only does your giant come down and create board advantage for you, but it also gives you a way to ideally leverage your mana advantage as well. And it can just create this like snowballing train of like every turn you're getting to spend more mana and every turn you're basically just like now the game's on your terms instead of on your opponent's terms. So that's a huge. That's kind of like the big bowling ball play of the deck. A few other things to note about Cyclone Summoner is that one of the very effective combos of the deck that I've found is just copying it with Glasspool Mimic. that my friends gives you a 3 mana Cyclone Summoner. Yeah, that's super gas. Another thing to note with Glasspool Mimic is that if you've copied another creature, like let's say a Quandrix Cultivator early in the game, which is also an amazing play, by the way, spend 3 mana, get a 3/4, get another land, but you can bounce it back to your hand with Cyclone Summoner and then copy Cyclone Summoner again. And of course, each Cyclone Summoner that you cast doesn't bounce the previous ones that you cast, and so you can generate these like turns where you just chain them into each other and dome your opponent for 7-14, and the game usually ends very quickly. So that's one of the big headliner plays of the deck. But then you also just get to play like 4 copies of Alrund's Epiphany. You get to play a couple of copies of Coma, Cosmos Serpent in basically a janky format. A terrible card like Coma can actually be pretty good.
Oh my God, you won't. You just can't. You just can't like the card. It's pathetic. You're out here mopping floors with it, and you don't like it.
You know, Covert Go Blue, I've lost enough games after resolving Coma in this format to have respect for how bad that card can still be. That's all I'm going to say about that. But yes, it can actually do some things in the right board state. It's a 7-drop. It's a powerful card. We all know it. Arjuna has a vendetta against the card, but I've been unironically playing it in this deck, and it is very good. Also, the combination with the Innkeeper is really amazing. So you can basically like gain, depending on how many Innkeepers you have, you basically gain 1 or 2 life a turn with Coma in play. So there's a lot of really nice little synergies like that. The Innkeeper also lines up very, very well with Alrund's Epiphany. And so oftentimes with this deck, you're gaining like 5 to 10 life over the course of the game, and it can really change the flow against aggro. And so one of the things I've been learning to do with this deck is to not block with my Innkeeper early in the game. Like, someone might offer you a really juicy looking trade. like they swing with their Usher of the Fallen or something like that, and you're like, oh, I could just block that with my Innkeeper. Sometimes I do, but if I look at my hand and I have like an Asika's Chariot or like a couple of Alrund's Epiphanies coming up, I might opt not to do that, especially if I'm going to have like a Quandrix Cultivator or like a better blocker next turn. So one of the things I've learned to do with this deck is to try to preserve my Innkeepers, and often in the mid to late game, they're going to end up gaining me like 6 to 10 life. So this is kind of an overview of how this deck plays out. Another thing that I think can maybe fly under the radar is that you get to play what are essentially two of the best creature lands in the format for this deck specifically. Because again, Hall of the Frost Giants gets so much better when you have a lot of mana, right? So in the late game, when you have like 10 or 12 lands out, you can actually attack with the Hall and leave up interaction. Same thing with the Lair of the Hydra. It's just, in a lot of decks, like in mono green, it's fine. It's a 4/4, or maybe in the late game, it's a 5/5 or a 6/6. In this deck, it can be like a 10/10, like the sky's the limit on that card. And so I think that you also get to play what end up being the most powerful and impactful creature lands in the format because you have the mana to power them out so quickly. Final note about the deck, Divide by Zero is just an amazing Magic card. Now, CGB, you were really at the forefront of playing this card. I remember you playing this card before I saw anyone else playing it, like seriously, unironically.
Thanks.
And this card is amazing. Like, it is truly amazing. Like, I have learned the hard way that you can get your Coma the Cosmos Serpent put back in your hand when you're casting it by Divide by Zero. So, you get to a point where, like, your Izzet Dragon's opponent, like, they have their stuff foretold, and you're like, all right, I'm going to slam this Coma, and the game is over. And then they just Divide by Zero, untap, Alrund's Epiphany, Goldspan Dragon, you're dead, So this card is just unbelievably amazing in this particular deck. Few examples of why it's good. In the Orzhov matchup, for example, oftentimes one of the things that Orzhov is trying to do is to get you into this position where you're committed to the board, and then they get to slam a Blood on the Snow and like reset the board and get back a Planeswalker and kind of snowball advantage from there. One of the sweet things that you can do in this deck is that you tend to be building a mana advantage over the game, and so you can get to a spot where you have a board which is quite threatening, but then you also have a Divide by Zero up, and when your opponent taps out for their Blood on the Snow, you get to just nope it, untap, crush them again. If you have another one, it's usually game over. So it's also great against cards like Alrund's Epiphany, or even, if your opponent fetches Mascot Exhibition from the sideboard. Oftentimes the tempo hit of just putting that back in their hand and basically taking their whole turn and then untapping and just getting in with your creature lands or whatever you have on the board again is just too much. So, and then of course you have the backdoor of dividing your own threats back to your hand, whether it's to protect your Coma from a Soul Shatter or whether it's to reset your Giant. Maybe you just need another, like, bounce everything with one of your Cyclone summoners. You just bring that one back to your hand. So I just think that one of the things I like about this deck is that there's more inherent synergy among the powerful cards in the deck than you often see. Like you'll see, people will obviously play Divide by Zero just because it's a good card. They'll play Alrund's Epiphany. It's just a good card. It's just the best thing to be doing at that point in the game. But this deck actually, like, it really heavily leverages a lot of these synergies to get to that next level.
Yeah, it's definitely a powerful deck. And you think it's like if you had a tier 1, you'd tier 1 it for sure?
I think it's either tier 1 or tier 1.5. Yep, I do.
Okay, let's are you willing to step back from this deck into more meta for a second?
Yes, definitely. So,
okay.
Yeah, I got to have my little moment. I will hand it over to you and let you talk about what you're seeing. Yep.
Oh, I mostly wanted to, what I wanted to do was just kind of table some decks and talk about, like, if we had to just tier them off the top of our head, where would we put them? Some of the more played decks in the meta. All right, first deck, mono white.
Are you asking me to rate it?
Yeah. I'm wondering, where would you place Code Spell Cleric and Friends?
Okay, so In my opinion, it entirely depends on the build. I think no shade on you, CGB, but I think that your first draft, that was like your week one mono white deck in the meta, I think is currently probably tier two. I think that if you update the list to take into account some of the things that are happening in the meta game, I think that you can probably get the deck up to like 1.5. I don't think mono white's a tier one deck though.
It's what I'm seeing the most by a lot, and it's the most grown if you're just on the draw and they play like 5 things on turn 3 and it's just over.
It can. It's basically taken the mantle from mono red is the way that I think of it.
Yeah, and mono red was always overrepresented in best of one and always like overhyped. There were times when it was a tier 1 deck, but it hasn't been for a while. It hasn't gotten any substantial new cards in a while. And yeah, mono white is just that. Or, I've started calling it white trash in my videos.
You're not wrong.
So yeah, I'm kind of mad at it because like basically everybody who doesn't want to work for wins grabbed this because a certain number of times a day they'll get to go first and just win. And it's like zero effort.
Well, you're right, and it's also just like the two-head deck, right? Like it's the deck where you can just play out your cards and not really think about it, and then either you win or you lose. And of course, like better players are not going to do that. They're going to take more time and make good plays and probably have a higher win percentage. But if you're one of those people who just wants to click buttons and drag cards onto the battlefield and select, attack all and stuff, it's a good deck for that.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning that at various points in our life, like if there's something on the TV and we're playing on our iPhone, or we're just trying to get a game in while we're waiting for our food somewhere, it's like, okay, I get it. You got a mono white. But at the same time, on the other side of the table, that anonymous person that you're just clowning because you god draw, we're like, it's so stupid. This is just so dumb. Why does this have to be this way?
Indeed.
So, I feel the same way. I think it's a tier 2 deck. Let's go to another one. So we've had some time with one of your original babies here. It's still around. It's the deck I have the worst win percentage against overall on my account for standard 2022. It is mono green.
Mono green.
What is mono green in this format?
So, okay, I like that you asked that specific question because one of the things that I think makes this format sweet is that mono green itself is not a solved deck list, right? I still see many variations of this deck. I still see like some people running Frog Hemoth. I still see various numbers of Gnarly Professors. Some people are doing the the ooze that adds counters to your creatures.
Let's call it the ooze. I don't have this one. I usually know these things. I know.
This. I thought I was going to have that one on memory, but I don't. But anyway, it's the 2/2 that puts a counter on stuff, and then when it attacks, it puts counters on things that have counters, all right?
Oh, that's the Oran Reef ooze.
Oran Reef ooze. Okay, well done. And then some people are even playing the new ooze from AFR. Ochre
That's
Jelly.
the one okay, you've got that one. We did it.
So... And then, of course, a lot of people, like, there's differences in opinion about which interaction you run. Some, various examples are Snakeskin Veil. Also, I think the what is it? The Abundant...
Inscription of Abundance?
Inscription of Abundance, I think, is one of the most interesting cards for mono green in the format, because I think that card is very good. I think the question is how many do you run and how well do they synergize with your deck? So, and then of course, you have some people who are still running like Jaspera Sentinel on the list. You have other people like me who think that that's a waste of time. So, so one of the coolest things about the format is I think that mono green is really not a single deck. There are very many different builds of the deck. What do you think about that? What are you seeing?
Oh, I agree with you completely. In particular, the version that drives me crazy, because I still enjoy playing all things Shambling Ghast, Eye Twitch, Deadly Dispute, treasure stuff. Like, yep. I have found and I keep exploring and finding more ways to play that shell because I love it so much. But there's a version of mono green that I come up against at least once a day, and it always just drives me crazy. because they're running like all the gnarly professors. They're running all the frog hemoths. They're running Vorinclex, and they're running like 4 snakeskin veils. And it's like, oh my God, everything tramples and is huge. And I just can't jump it and I can't kill it.
You
It's
know what
so
annoys me
much.
about that CGB is that they're still running 23 lands as well.
Maybe, yeah. Of course, of course. That is. If I did find that out, it would tilt me. That then it must be true. Yeah.
Yep, but yeah, a perfect foil to like trying to gum up the board with, Professor of Symbology and all that kind of stuff. So, yep.
Yeah. Perfect foil to that deck. I will say, when I think about mono green, it's not the fastest. You can build the white decks and the goblin decks to go lower. So
Yeah.
it almost is like mid-range aggro, and its size plays into that, right? Because if you're on the
Mm-hmm.
draw, you don't just lose because your opponent got to play the first creature. Your creatures can be bigger than theirs just on rate. And
Yeah.
Old Growth Troll also plays into that great because if they kill it, you ramp and you just get to do more with your mana ahead of them. So it's kind of a mid-range aggro deck.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I correct me if I'm wrong. That sounds like what your ramp deck wants to feast upon. Like
Yes.
it sounds like Simic ramp just loves that matchup.
Yes. So now, okay, I'm really glad that you mentioned that because what I was going to say is that I think mono green is tier one. And I think that one of the reasons it's tier one is, and this is what you should look out for, crafties, in a deck which is truly going to be a player in any meta, is does it still manage to have a good win percentage against the decks that are best against it? And the answer with mono green is yes. So I basically, like adopted and filled out my version of this Simic ramp deck to be very good against mono green, and I still only have a 60% win rate against it. And
Mm-hmm.
this is after like so many matches. You know what I mean? It's just
Oh
so many
yeah.
matches.
Oh yeah.
And the reason for that is that, yep, mono green, just a good deck, can still catch you with your pants down, can still, you stumble at all, you flood out for one turn, you miss a land drop, mono green can just still crush you.
Yeah.
So yes, I definitely like. I think that a deck like the Simic Ramp deck is probably the best way to beat it, and I'm still happy when I see that turn one Jaspera Sentinel or whatever. It's like, okay, this is going to be a good matchup, but I still lose to it every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is a very powerful deck. It just asks really tough questions every turn, almost no matter what build it is. It's hard to
Yeah,
prepare for because you don't know if they run Snakeskin Veil, you don't know if they run Frog Hemoth. You really can't play around all the potential threats of it, so you just have to gamble.
yeah,
The mono green has weaknesses to Blood on the Snow. It has weaknesses to Cyclone Summoner, but sometimes you just don't get there. But I still agree it's in my opinion, it's like it should be the go-to tier one option for the format if you're not sure what
yeah,
to play or where to start, because I don't think it will be bad after rotation. I think that
yeah,
this green deck, even if it gained almost nothing from Innistrad, would probably still win games. And we haven't seen Innistrad. It's such a thing to say right now. Will it be an Eldraine? Will it be an Adventures in the Forgotten Realms? Will it be a Strixhaven? If it's an Eldraine, obviously that's a really dumb thing that I just said. But I just think that's so unlikely.
yeah.
Just looking at the cards that they've revealed and the direction that things are going, I don't think it's going to be an Eldraine. I think it's going to be another Strixhaven, another, Kaldheim was actually really powerful. We just
It
don't
was.
really realize it. But
Yeah.
if it's on Kaldheim's power level, I think that you could get into green now and still win games in October.
Oh, I totally agree. I totally agree. Do you want to know my favorite adaptation that I've seen lately, CGB, and something I would definitely be trying moving forward?
No, I don't
People,
want to hear it. Don't even tell me about cool stuff like that. No, okay, go on.
okay, crafties, this is sweet. People have been playing Jon Snow in that deck. And
Oh, I have seen this.
yes, it is gas. It is freaking gas. So, okay, here was the problem with Jon Snow. Easy to kill, just a 3/3. Didn't line up well against cards like Lovestruck Beast. There were also even just like, Bone Crusher giants and stuff in regular standard. And so it was just you didn't have like a reasonable assurance that you were going to A, untap with it, and B, get it through. This format solves a lot of those problems because, first of all, people just, there isn't like a ton of removal in the form of, oh, I don't know, eliminate or heartless act to get rid of it. So people in this format have to kind of, they have to have a real kill spell, which is just a little bit less likely than it would be in regular standard. Another thing is that in a format where cards like Snakeskin Veil are already good and they're already working in your archetype, it just, it's a perfect fit for that card. One of the most devastating play patterns that I've seen is something like maybe you, like on turn 3, you play an Old Growth Troll, and then on turn 4, you play a Jon Snow with Snakeskin Veil backup. And then the following turn, it's like, you can play a Blizzard Brawl, like targeting your Jon Snow, kill one of their blockers. Now Jon's indestructible. Now there's almost no way it's not going to survive combat. You swing in, you untap, you play your Asika's Chariot or whatever as a follow-up, and it's just such a powerful sequence. And then, of course, if you're playing like Inscription of Abundance and all that kind of stuff, these are just all things, or even Ranger class. Perfect example. If you curve Ranger class into Jon Snow and they don't immediately kill Jon Snow, now it's attacking as a 4/4 the following turn. So these are all things that make the weaknesses of Jon kind of non-existent. I think one of my favorite play patterns with Jon is you can go activate Faceless Haven, get in, untap the lands you use to activate it, and go from there. So anyway, yeah, Jon, I think Jon, for me, is going to be an auto include in this archetype moving forward. Maybe just a one-of. Definitely don't want to double up on those. But I think it's sweet.
That is a heck of an introduction to your one-of. I mean, sometimes you got to do it. Sometimes the one-of is the over-the-top rope move, Did Macho Man Randy Savage need more than one of those elbow drops? No, never. Just needed one.
I mean, 2 max crafties, that's all I'm saying. Like, don't be don't be the fool whose opening hand is like 3 Jon Snows and you basically like all dressed up and nowhere to be, right?
All right. So yeah, green, tier 1, lots of options, solid deck.
Yeah.
All right. Dragons, blue-red dragons. After we've had some time, it was the go-to. It was the number one. This is going to be the meta. What is it right now, do you think? Do you like what I did there? What is it?
I missed it at first, but I appreciate it, CGB. What Prismari? Indeed, CGB. Well, I don't know. I think at the beginning of the format, it was more like a 55%, 60% deck. Now, I just think it's like straight 50%. I think that Izzet, with its best draws, is unbeatable, and with its average draws, is just totally 50%. It can look real embarrassing. It definitely has some bad matchups. It has a bad mono-green matchup in particular, which I think is a very strong reason to consider not playing it. I think it has a fair matchup against most of the rest of the decks in the format. Maybe I'm missing something like a Dimir Control, which is good against it or something, but that's kind of my assessment. Yeah, what do you think?
So the way that the meta has moved, I think everybody woke up ready for Goldspan Dragon after day 1. And for a long time, you just had to be ready for Goldspan Dragon. So people like Soul Shatter was suddenly a very craftable card. You know what I mean? Or you had to play really low to the ground stuff to take advantage of the fact that Goldspan Dragon isn't good when it's blocking. It has to attack. So, so everybody was like thinking about that matchup, and the deck had a really hard time. I think that things have gone far enough around the circle of life, the circle of meta life, that people aren't as concerned about Goldspan Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
I have played so many decks where I'm like thinking a lot about handling the aggro matchups and handling the treasure matchups. And then my opponent plays like turn 1, what is that? Volatile Fjord.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh no.
Like, oh God.
Like, I am cold like a snowland. I saw it coming in a dragon.
You look at your keep and you're like, oh god.
Oh man. So that has
Yeah,
happened to me. That has happened to me enough times now,
yeah,
even when playing like more aggressive decks like Gruul and some of the other things I've been trying. I think that the meta has gone far enough that it's a real player now, but I think that people still try to get really greedy with that deck. Why are they running Galazeth Prismari in the deck when it can't have like Maze Mind Tome or doesn't make any artifacts at all? Like, why do we
dude.
want to tap out for a 4 mana 3/4 with the tiniest little bit of upside ramp on turn 4 with that deck? I don't know. I
Dude,
I see it
the
everywhere.
only the only thing that I can think of which is sweet when it goes off is you combine it with unexpected windfall. Yeah.
Okay, but I mean that's like an instant, and like
Yeah.
that's what I want to do on turn 4.
Yeah.
It is very much kind of, you know what it is? It's Simic Flash. Remember Simic Flash with Nissa? That's
Yes.
exactly what this deck is.
Yeah.
We don't want to tap out on turn 4. We don't have a Nightpack Ambusher. God, I wish we did. But Galazeth Prismari is not Nightpack Ambusher, so we don't want to be
No.
tapping out on turn 4. We
Yeah.
need to be reacting, and then you drop your Nissa and you untap your land and make 2 mana, and you use that mana to protect it. The like my revisiting of Izzet Dragons so far has been like everything is 2 mana,
Yeah.
everything. After Foretell, at least, like
Yeah.
I just don't want to play Prismari Command, maybe 1 or 2, but not that many. And I don't want to play Galazeth. And Unexpected Windfall, I'm still really skittish about, but maybe I could give it a try. But I like Behold the Multiverse better. And I'm just trying to make sure that I also don't run Imrith. I really just want the Gold Spans. Like
Yeah.
Goldspan is the only worthy dragon for me right now because everybody's figured out how to answer those dragon cards pretty effectively.
I agree with you. I think the core of the deck is still cheap interaction, counter spells, gold span dragon, Alarin's Epiphany. Like
Yeah.
that is the deck. That's how you win with the deck. I think if you're messing around too much with the 6 mana hasty dragon, or yeah, Imrith, or trying to do cute stuff with Galazeth and unexpected windfall and stuff, I think you're kind of missing the point of the deck. I mean, not that those experimentations aren't sweet, not that you can't have a lot of fun doing that if that's what you want to do. But I totally agree, man. Like, keep it lean, keep it mean, play mostly cheap cards, maneuver the game state to where your opponent's tapped out or whatever, build up enough mana, and then just drop the dragon, drop the epiphanies, take turns, and win.
I still feel like it has the best of one problem of having the wrong cards at the wrong time, where it would be a tier 1 best of 3 deck, and I think it's a tier 2 best of 1 deck. That's
Yeah.
the way it makes sense to me. But I do think it's a very defendable choice right now because people are they figured out the main meta and they're brewing a little, or they're trying to answer specifically green in the creature decks. And like, how do you like your Izzet Dragons deck with your Cyclone Summoner ramp deck, for example?
It's a 50-50 matchup.
Yeah,
It's
you're not happy though, right? You're not like
no.
pumping the fist
I'm
because
I'm
you
not
know you're
lick I'm not licking my lips. Yeah.
at some point in that matchup you're going to be playing something for 6 or 7 mana and hoping they don't have Saw It Coming, right? And that's
Yes.
always a scary moment.
Yes. It's actually so my strategy. I think that I gained a lot of equity with the Simic deck once I just got better at playing it and I got better at playing the matchups. And what I learned to do was to just focus on ramping and then getting in with creature lands and forcing my Izzet opponent to like deal with that, because they really, they know that they're playing against a deck that can like cast multiple powerful spells in the same turn. So they're not getting aggro with their Goldspan dragons. Usually when they play against the Simic deck, they're like taking it easy and trying to play control in the game. And so you punish them by just
That's
winding
got
up
to
your.
be a mistake though, right?
I mean,
I think that has
yeah.
to be a mistake.
So here's the thing, okay? This is where it gets like kind of what's the term I'm going for? It's like the double agent crossing the double agent. Is
Okay.
that like, so I'll leave up mana because I'm trying to play around their counter magic, right? So what I'm doing is I'm leaving up, let's say, eureka moment, or or it's looking like it's going to be their gold span turn, so I'm leaving up divide by zero. So then, they see my open mana, they're not going to play into me, right? So then they do nothing, and then I untap. I don't want to play into that counter magic, so we're kind of at this impasse. And so then how I exploit that is just by firing up my one of my creature lands and leaving up interaction. So
Yeah, yeah. It feels to me that, like, just thinking about the deck list the way that I know them, and this is where, like, knowing the meta comes in, because random person on ladder probably doesn't play against Simic Ramp or talk about it very much. But the
yeah,
deck lists, as I would expect them, tell me I'm just supposed to slam into your open mana as the Dragons player, which is a very weird role for the Dragons deck. But I mean, if you have Divide by
hmm
Zero, I've got to get it out of the way. Like, I can't just sit there staring at my Goldspan Dragon waiting for this beautiful window of things to come together against your deck. Like, that doesn't make sense to me.
no, you're right, and especially since like it's a cardinal rule of Magic that the player whose plan is smaller needs to push in the early to mid game, right?
Yep.
Because
Yeah.
like, you look at inevitability, and whichever deck has inevitability is the deck that can get to just sit back and play the long game, right? And so yeah, in that matchup, the Izzet list is definitely the aggro, and they definitely do need to be pushing.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, maybe that'll make those matchups you have with the Dragons deck even more interesting. I do, that does sound like a fun matchup. Like, I would sleeve up
Yeah.
and play some of that right now.
It is really fun, very interesting games, a lot of mind games, a lot of and definitely one of those matchups where you make one wrong move and you lose. So, yep, very
All
very
right.
fun stuff.
So the black white treasure deck. I made that video. It got around. Other people have played it. They've played a lot of types of it. Like, there's a lot of mono black, there's a lot of Golgari, but I mean, really any deck that starts with Eye Twitch, Shambling Ghast, Deadly Dispute, and has some planeswalkers like Lolthor, Kaya, and Blood on the Snow. I
Yep.
just call them like the treasure decks right now.
hmm
How do you rate these decks? And I do want to hear, like, what do you think their biggest weaknesses are, or like, what do you do with that? And before you rate it, I'm going to say I was really proud of this for no real reason other than I just like having these things to say. MTG Arena Zone had the black white Orzhov Blood Money mid-range deck as like a tier 2 or something for a long time. They updated like a few days ago and moved it to tier 1. Just saying.
Dude,
Just saying.
okay. So, um there's a lot of things we could talk about because I think this is currently the most variation in the meta is like, what do you put in your Orzhov Snow deck? What are you playing with your treasure package? Because so this is the thing, crafties. We had the adventure package in the last format, and we've moved to the treasure package. So I think you would agree with me, CGB, that we have officially created like it's a little coven of cards that you're now just gonna like try in many many different shells, and it's
Yep.
basically
Yep.
what you outlined. It's the merchant and the deadly dispute and yeah, anyway, the 1/1, etc. I'm bad at remembering card names, but
Eye Twitch,
yes,
Shambling Ghast, Blood on the
shambling
Snow,
ghast.
and some planeswalkers.
Yep, yep. So I think that really is like the package. Or you could take the foundational package of the cheaper creatures and then combine it with the dragon and then Goldspan Dragon, and then you have like more of a Rakdos treasure thing. So that's a thing too. But okay, so I'll tell a little story time. I was really worried with the Simic list against my matchup with your Blood Money deck because in initial testing it was looking really bad. I made some tweaks to the deck, which I think do give it a better matchup. But it's funny because so I've been playing on the ladder lately, and I've been crushing. I've been absolutely crushing these Blood on the Snow decks, and I was like, wow, I'm doing a lot better than I thought I was going to be doing. Like, is this actually just a really good matchup for me? And then this is what I realized, CGB, is they're not playing your Blood Money deck.
Nope, they're not. Ah.
So I don't know who it was. Probably some hive mind thing came up with an alternate version of the deck, which I think is like a whole tier worse than your deck.
Thanks.
So I think if anyone was paying attention to your Blood Money deck, they would figure out that like the whole deck is designed to make Kaya good, right? Like the whole game plan of the Blood Money deck, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, but the whole game plan of the deck is to just like you cast Kaya, it dies. You cast another Kaya, it dies. You bring it back with Blood on the Snow, it dies. Maybe at some point you get the lesson from your sideboard that brings it back. Or with your second Blood on the Snow, you get Kaya back again. Eventually you ultimate Kaya. That's how you win the game, right?
Hmm.
So I think so. What I've been seeing is that people have been playing a version of the deck where they're like, "Oh, Lolth is a good planeswalker. Why don't we just put in some Lolths and then we'll put in like a couple of Onyxes at the top end?" And that's just got to be better than Kaya, right? Like those planeswalkers are just better than Kaya. And yes, in a vacuum, they totally are. But in that deck, no, they are not. So did I get it right, CGB?
Yeah, I think so. I would just throw in there. It's not. It's about making Kaya good. It's also about the creatures around Kaya getting those ghost form counters and that being
Yes.
good, which is
Yes.
way better. It's way better than it was in the last format. It's definitely underappreciated. People don't know how to play against it, and a lot of times there's no good way to play against it.
No.
So yeah, a version went around called that got labeled Orzhov Control, and it runs like combinations of Lulth and Kaya. It runs Doomscar. It has some other things. The big cut for me is Elite Spellbinder, and I'm like, I
Dude,
no, that in
no.
Kaya is Splinter Twin, baby. That is how
Dude,
it's done.
I that was my realization was that the reason I was beating that deck was that they weren't running Elite Spellbinder. Crafties, I think if you're running white in this format, you run Elite Spellbinder. Period. Like,
Full stop.
period. I don't care if you're running a control deck, you run Elite Spellbinder. It is one of the best cards in the format. I'm staking my reputation on that as well.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
buy it. That card is an absolute killer, especially on the play. Just absolutely wrecks all kinds of strategies. All the foretell cards like Allrun's Epiphany, so much worse when they get
Yeah.
nailed by Elite Spellbinder. All the planeswalkers, the blood on the snows. Like the spells in this format are expensive. The creatures are often cheap, but the spells are very expensive. So
Yeah.
every time you hit an expensive spell, it's like removing it from the game forever. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah. And I think in the early weeks of the format, like when mono green was big and when like these white aggro decks were really big, then I think people were kind of low on Spellbinder because, yeah, I mean, it gets worse against cheaper cards, definitely. But like once this kind of mid-range snow plan started to be a thing, like yeah, nabbing your opponent's blood on the snow, nabbing your opponent's Kaya, yeah, nabbing an Oran's Epiphany that they didn't have time to foretell. It can just be a total game ender. And I find that the games that I lose the most playing anything except like a mono green deck in the format are where my opponent just goes Spellbinder into Spellbinder. And it's just usually game over at that point.
What do you think about the versions that don't run white? Because that's the weird thing. We've got that package that we talked about. It's mostly black. I
Mm-hmm.
I do think Kaya and Spellbinder, and then you also get Banishing Verse. Like if you are sweaty try hard, it's hard to beat that combination of cards. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people are doing Golgari with binding the old gods, and skeleton swarming is kind of, oh, I hate that card so much, but people love that card. And I feel like I have to keep proving that it's bad. So every time I play against it, I'm like, all right, I have to win. I
Pressure's
cannot
on.
lose. But people love that
Yeah.
card and you see it. So yeah, just kind of curious, like, have you seen like the discard versions? Because that was a version I built to prey on the original that just ran Inscription of Ruin and a lot of discard cards.
Yeah, I found the discard version to be very strong, specifically against the Simic ramp, um, because one of the easiest ways to lose in Simic ramp is you just like flood out and don't have a lot of card advantage. So they make you discard all of your haymakers, your expensive cards that you don't have time to cast, and then you're just top decking, and half of your top decks are like lands and dorks and stuff, and you just kind of lose. So I think the discard version is actually real, and yeah, I could imagine it being really, really good in like in the mirror against the more traditional version of the deck. Seems really solid to me, and just Blood on the Snow to get back another discarder is can just be really backbreaking. So yeah, I think that that's real. Like that deck has impressed me so far. I don't know though, like how does it do against like mono green, for example?
Against mono green, you really do need to cast your Blood on the Snow. So I hope you drew
Yeah,
Shambling Ghast and Deadly Dispute, like you draw it up, because that's
yeah,
another interesting feature of this format. Like everybody ramps.
yeah.
If your deck doesn't ramp at all, it's like a bad Esper control deck, and even then, you could call Foretell as kind of a ramp in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Like you spend 2 mana on an early turn to save mana on a future turn. So everybody who's not like pure aggro in this format ramps to some degree. And it's kind of absurd that your control deck can have turn one Shambling Gas, turn two Deadly Dispute, turn three, you could have a Kaya, or you could have a Goldspan Dragon. You know, it's like something's coming. It's kind
Mm-hmm.
of crazy that way.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I would say, let's see, in my experience playing Golgari, I think it's just not good enough. I have found Golgari to be inconsistent. I have also found that I think having a board presence trumps not having a board presence. And so, um, so in the regular standard format, a card like Binding the Old Gods can actually be pretty good because it can do stuff like it can kill your opponent's Great Henge, and then you can Wrath the board, and it lines up a little bit better with the things that are good in that format. But in this format, it's kind of like like let's say you're playing against these Blood on the Snow decks. Like, what are you doing with your Binding? Are you killing your opponent's Merchant? Like, lol, that just doesn't do anything, right?
I
Or
think
like
most people get excited to kill the Kaya or the Lulth, and then she's back.
it's just not that big of a deal, right? Like it like
Yeah.
people who play those planeswalkers already got their money, and just like you said, they're gonna get that money again. So yeah, I think that Binding is a really bad card in the format right now. It's just also not good against aggro. You're spending 4 mana to kill their like 2 to 3 mana card.
Yeah, kind of amazing that that's true, actually, because
Yeah,
I think a lot of people thought Binding was going to just be a rock in the format.
I think it's like one of the better cards in the format. It's just that people are playing like it's funny, like I think of this as a format of like people are playing a bunch of cards that really aren't that powerful, but they synergize
Yeah.
well, right? And
How
so
about this? How about this? Binding is one of the best cards in the format and one of the worst cards in the meta.
that's exactly it. You summed it up perfectly, right? And I think it's just kind of like that. Like when I go down the Golgari list, like for example, how much Shadow's Verdict are you seeing in the meta right now? I haven't seen that card in like a week or something.
Yeah, all the decks that would run it also want to run cheap black creatures and possibly get them back sometimes. So it cannibalizes
Exactly.
itself. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think that the head to head has proven that even playing a control deck, you still want to have creatures on the board. You don't want to be one of these people who's trying to keep the board clear because there are too many creature lands.
Yep.
Green has some good haste creatures. It's just, the other like the more control decks don't care. So it's basically like, yeah, I think that in this format, like you need to get on the board somehow. And if you're trying to play like a counter spell wrath game, you're just gonna get overrun, in my opinion.
Yep. Gotta the creature lands, I feel like were one of the definitive things about the format that everybody had them and had a lot of them pretty much
Yeah,
from early on. And yeah, chump blocking was suddenly required. You can't just sweep the board. You have to sweep the board and block the next
yeah,
turn.
absolutely, absolutely. Now, here, however, is a combo that I'm surprised I haven't seen more. Have you tried running Burning Rune Demon in any of your Blood on the Snow decks?
No, I haven't. I've been if I have a 6 mana card, it's always been Professor Onyx, like to go with the Blood on the Snow, because I'm just
Mm-hmm.
worried about the cost. But tell me I mean, that is a curious one because I think about getting it back with Blood on the Snow. I think about putting a ghost form on it with Kaya. Oh,
That's what I'm
okay.
saying.
It sounds pretty fun. It
Yeah, I
sounds
mean,
pretty dope.
like think about this, like you wrath the board, you get back a 6/6 flyer, by the way, and then that card gets you like the worst of the two best cards in your deck, right? And then the thing is that they also put whichever the other one was in the graveyard, and you might get to reanimate that card with your next Blood on the Snow. So like think about the example where like you blood on the snow, you get back your demon, you select two planeswalkers, one of them's going in the yard, and you're gonna get it back, right? So I don't know what you cut to make room for it, right? That's probably the biggest question is that you're already running like a bunch of expensive cards. But if it were me, like it's not really the style of deck I enjoy playing, but if I was playing one of these Blood on the Snow decks, I would definitely be finding room for at least one of those.
I was about to say, have you tried it? But I should know better. I should know
I
better. Simic
so
Mage.
I actually I did try it in my Golgari control deck. So here was the wombo combo because you know me, Covert Go Blue. I like a good squeeze, right? I like making a series of plays that make my opponent go, "Oh my god, I will never win this game," right? And so for me, my favorite thing to do was to put down Burning Rune Demon, and my two selections were Harness Infinity and Bala Ged Recovery. And I was like, I'm getting it, baby. I'm getting it, whether you want me to or not.
Wow. So your 6 mana play sets up a 7 mana play that draws like 7 or more cards.
That's what I'm talking about.
That's extra. That is
I'm
extra.
I'm surprised that that's not more up your alley, CGB.
I don't know, man. I like having options and open mana every now and then on my turns. I like playing around stuff. I don't like always presenting the big questions. I like presenting the right answers.
There you go. There you go. See, leave it up to Arjuna to play a control deck, which is basically just like a thinly veiled, like go over the top, crush your soul in one turn deck, you know? I'm like, I mean, Ultimatum is just such a perfect deck for me, man. I love decks where people think that you're playing reactively, and then the next turn you're like, no, I have the biggest creature on the board, I'm going to win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always right up your alley until it's cool. And then you've got to dump it and go find something janky to do.
You know me too well.
You would hate this Cyclone Summoner deck if more people had picked it up by now.
Probably. I
I keep
probably
playing.
would.
There are two people who are consistently like top 150 Mythic who I play almost every day who are on Simic.
Okay,
Almost
that's good to
every
know.
day. There's some
That's good to
interesting
know.
builds too. Like they'll test of talent me multiple times.
Ooh,
They'll
yeah.
inscription of what's the
The
blue
blue one?
inscription? Yeah.
Insight?
Oh, insight. Yeah, well done.
Yeah.
They'll inscription of insight kicker me 3 turns in a row.
Yeah, that card does snowball very nicely. I will say that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
some people are believers and they are doing really well with it, and more people could probably stand to play that deck. Are you still
Yep.
on the chariot for the flex spots?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Double Chariot is just absolutely gas in that deck.
Did
I
you see
mean,
my Naya deck? Yeah, you were at that stream.
was it
That's
was that the what Druid class deck?
Yeah, Druid class deck. That's it. Naya Druid
Yep.
class. It's basically a chariot deck. Don't tell anyone.
Dude, I think that deck's really sweet. I actually played against it on the ladder recently. I did win, but it was one of the decks that gave me this feeling of like, wow, this deck's actually going to go over the top of me if I'm not careful. Um, like that deck can generate the kind of advantage that no deck could come back from.
Yeah, it really can just chain off spitting out 2 or 3 lands a turn until it has like 20 lands, and then it makes two 20/20s with haste on the same turn and swings. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
a lot of fun. It
yeah.
is one of the most fun decks I've played.
How like do you think that it's just kind of a jank deck, or do you think that that deck could be tier?
The hard thing about it is it's a very, when confronted with pressure from green, white, something like that, it really only has a game plan. It doesn't have flexibility.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
really hard to win if you don't Doomscar, because otherwise you're just hoping that like somehow you chariot in Mascot Exhibition before they run you over, and it's really hard to play Chariot from behind. If you play against any kind of a control deck, like mid-range to control, and I don't know, they're not like some kind of a recursive mega graveyard deck like Hoffrey is a card that gave me a hard time. Hoffrey and Aura from the Clerics, right?
I told you Hoffrey was gonna come for you, man.
It always, there's always one. But anyway, that like the deck's only interaction-esque is Shadow Skull Smashing and Doomscar. So it's not going to exile anything, you know? Yeah. So its game plan is just narrow. But if your opponent is trying to react to you at all, you can just drive them insane. Because the Bard class turns on these lands that are just giant monsters. The Asika's Chariot is making creatures, attacking with creatures. Minsk, if you drop a Minsk with like 15 mana on the board, Boo is getting some, you know?
Yeah.
It's kind of absurd how much damage the thing can just start throwing at you turn after turn after turn. It's really fun. It's a fun deck. And Showdown of the Scalds is it's a tough weapon to wield, but decks that wield it well, it is a hell of a Magic card.
So one of my favorite things about that deck is I almost feel like you're doing a Temur Adventure impression, right? With your Druid class, is that you get to like exile a bunch of cards off the top of your deck and then like play all of the lands, right? So
should we introduce Druid class? I feel like we're talking about this like it's a known entity, but it's only been out for like 3 days. I like played it and made a video with it, and some people may now have watched it. So
all right, take us through this card.
Yeah, Druid class is the 1 in a green class, and its main mode is whenever you play a land, you gain a life. So right there, you've got a little bit of gains to keep you alive and let you take some beatings. Its second mode is for 2 in a green. You can now play an additional land every turn. So now you can, and that's nice. You gain a life for each land, and you can play 2 lands a turn. In this format, it's really hard to keep the land flowing. Like there's not a lot of efficient card draw, but with Showdown of the Scald specifically, it's pretty common to exile more than 1 land. And if you can play like 2 or 3 lands over the turn after you play the Showdown, like you really get your money's worth. And then the last chapter is it chapter? No, class level. The last level
maybe? Yeah,
it's a level. The last level on Druid class is for 4 in a green. Target land becomes an XX creature with haste that is still a land, and X is equal to the number of lands you control. So the deck runs, I think it's like 29 land. If you count, like it runs 4 Emeria's Calls and 4 Shatter Skull Smashings, like all these modal lands, so that when you get in the late game, you can cast the spell side. And it also has 4 field trips. It has 3 copies of Yasharn, which fetches a plains and a forest when it enters the battlefield. So it just hits an absurd amount of land drops and makes giant monsters with the Druid class and just swings over and crushes you. The Yasharn is sweet because Yasharn turns off the treasure decks, which nobody is ready for.
Yep.
With Yasharn on the board, you can't sacrifice a treasure. Neither player can do it.
And it doesn't get hit by Vanishing Verse, right? So
that's right.
I think, like you need some real removal to get rid of that thing too. Yeah, that's totally sweet, man.
Oh man, the number of times I have like cast it, and then my opponent on end step, or after a chump block, tries to cast their Deadly Dispute. Yep. You don't know for sure they have Deadly Dispute. They just have 2 open mana, and they're just sitting there. And they're just
mousing over. That card's just lighting up.
Their cards are just lighting up over and over, and they're just sitting there, and they're like, "What is happening?" Or my favorite is when they attack with their Goldspan Dragon, and then you see them like trying to activate their treasures because they want to play their All Runs Epiphany, but they can't. They can't do it. They don't have the mana. They got to pass, and now they're dead.
Oh, I love it, dude. It really is the ultimate troll in this format specifically.
Yeah, the pig gets the money, man. It's actually beautiful. It's a wonderful feeling that you can only really get with a Yasharn deck, and this is the best Yasharn deck in my opinion by a mile because you make so much use of all the mana.
I agree. And I think one of the things that you have indirectly highlighted here, but which I want to come back to, and again, it's one of the reasons I keep harping on this Simic deck, but it's one of the reasons I think it's one of the best decks in the format. Mana advantage really matters in this format. That's why you were talking about ramp. Like people are playing treasure, people are playing ramp in all of these various forms, and like the person who gets to untap with a bunch of lands and like multi-spell and like play some powerful six drops and stuff like that is generally the person winning the game. And I can't stress this enough, crafties. Like I think one of the understated reasons why CGB's Naya deck is winning more games is just that he's probably ending up with like 40 to 60% more mana than his opponents, and he's just using that mana. And the way that Magic works is that the player who spends more mana tends to win, especially when there isn't a lot of like really good like counter spell or like super cheap effective removal, which we don't have in this format. So in lieu of that, like because we don't have like a rogues deck, say, or a really lean and mean like red aggro deck with Embercleave and stuff. Because of that, we end up in this more mid-rangey format where the player who spends more mana generally wins. So I think that that's something you should really be thinking about in any deck except like your go wide mono white deck, for example, or like like even like you said in green, like you have to be thinking about like how do I generate some kind of a mana advantage. It's one of the reasons I like Jon Snow, right? Is because it gives you a mana advantage. So I think that's one of the big questions in the format, in my opinion. What do you think about that?
No, I think that you're right in the matchups where, like you mentioned, mono white tries to get around that by just playing its cards as fast as possible and winning. And there's always a deck like that. But I think it's one of the reasons control decks have such a hard time. Like traditional
Yes.
control has a really hard time because everybody's ramping and it's hard to get that mana advantage. I have had a ton of success with an Esper control list that's just, it looks like a very old school control list. We just have the best cheap removal spells, the best sweeper, the card draw that's like Scry to the bottom, draw two, behold the multiverse. And then we play All Runs Epiphany and Planeswalkers. And it just doesn't look like anything special. Even though I win a good amount and it does well, whenever I'm playing it, I just feel like I gave myself a handicap. I don't have free mana lying around. I'm not doing like absurd over the top powerful things. I'm just, I don't know. Feels very medium. And I love control decks.
If there's one person I know who loves like crushing with medium decks, it's you, CGB.
Ah, man. Well, content, baby. If I think that the true test of the modern content creator for Magic the Gathering is how much crushing they can do with medium decks.
I agree. I mean, it highlights your skill at the game, man. Anyone can win with like the top tier one deck, right? But if you can pick up like a bit more of a random list and still win, yeah, that's some real skill.
It doesn't mean I'm gonna make you like your cleric class good though. Those of you out there getting ideas, you're gonna send me your bad decks and be like, make this card good. It's my favorite, and I'm still gonna say nah, nah. there's gotta be something there to begin with.
Yep. Okay, so we could say more about this format, but I think it's getting to be about time to wrap it up. So what I would like to do before we go, CGB, can we create a, at the moment anyway, somewhat definitive tier list for the format?
Try. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a ton of decks. But yeah, I'm down for that. How you want to play it?
Okay, so let's just try to go. How about this? We'll kind of do a little rehash in a sped up version of what we did earlier in the program, and see if we have any final thoughts. So we can just like list the archetype. We'll each say what tier we think it's in. Sound good?
Okay, let's go.
Okay, so mono green, I think solidly tier one.
Solid one.
Okay,
Absolutely.
all right. I'm gonna stake my claim on Simic. I think it is either tier one or tier 1.5. What about you?
I'm
I,
gonna
I
give
won't
it
be
a
offended. I won't be offended, bro.
I I'm still gonna go with a 2.
Yeah, that's fine. All right. Now it's going to be hard to classify all of these, so I'm just going to say like Orzhov, Blood on the Snow decks, of which I think that your original or some version very close to your original Blood Money build is the best deck, and I think that that deck is tier 1 as well.
Yeah, I give that one a 1. I give most of the offshoots though a 2 or a lower, quite honest.
So do you agree with me that something very close to that original build is the best version?
Yes.
Okay. Playing Kaya, crafties, like play Kaya in that deck. Okay, and then I'm trying to think about, in my opinion, those are the archetypes that I think are in the running for tier 1. Are there any other decks you can think of that are in the running for tier 1?
I wish I could say dragons. It I can't. I've said it a number of times, but I think is a tier. If it has sideboard, it would be tier 1. But so it's right there
Yes.
to me. It's
Yes.
right there.
Yeah. I think Izzet in best of 1 is solidly tier 2, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think anytime you see that deck though, you're probably like, oh.
Yeah.
like you have to respect it at all times. So
It can always win. Yeah. I also think solidly tier 2 right now is the mono white go wide deck. I do think that if you're metagaming, I think if you're metagaming and you're willing to switch up your list, I think you could probably get up to like 1.5.
Yeah.
That's where I am with mono white.
Yeah, I'll stick with a 2 on mono white.
Yep. Okay. I've also found Rakdos lists of any variety to be at best tier 2, but usually tier 3.
Yeah, I'm gonna go. In the beginning, I had higher hopes for the deck, but once I found Blood Money as just a better grind, I'm going to tier 3 for that. We didn't talk
Yeah.
about this one though. I think the Mardu Sacrifice deck is significantly better than any Rakdos.
Okay.
I think the Exodus version is a solid tier 1.5. Like it's a
Okay.
very scary deck.
This has been my experience with that deck is when they blood avatar me on turn 3, I usually lose, and when they don't do that, I usually win.
Yeah, it has this explosive potential with Blood Avatar and Goldspan and Showdown that the other decks don't really have. So its nut draw is scarier than most.
I have found another card I've found where its bark feels worse than its bite to me is Orcus.
Yeah.
It's a card which consistently does powerful things when it resolves, but I just keep tending to win those games anyway.
Yep. Agreed.
And then control. Is there any control deck in this format that you think is better than tier 3?
I'm going to talk about Dimir Control because I still play against it every day. I think that deck is tier 3.
Yeah,
I think it's best. Like, yeah, and I think it's among like the best that control can do in a traditional control sense. And when I say traditional control, I mean bunch of removal spells, bunch of counter spells, no board presence, win someday. I just don't think. Why would you play that when like you can play value creatures that are better than the removal spells, like Professor of Symbology, like the Merchant, Blood Merchant. Elite. We talked about Elite Spellbinder teaming up with Kaya. Like teaming these cards up with Kaya is so much better than like so trying to use removal spells in this format.
Yep, totally agree. Yeah. Okay. Any other decks or archetypes that you want to discuss?
Your deck was Skeletal Swarming. It's F tier. You listener. F. I'm not. F. Nope. You get an F. We're moving on.
Couldn't agree more. Also, notably absent from our discussions today is Mono Red. That's because I'm just going to say it for both of us. We both think that deck sucks.
I had a good record with that deck on ladder, which was kind of insanely silly. But yeah, Goblins with a bunch of burn actually maybe tier 3, but worse than so many of the other aggro decks. Why would you do it?
Would you agree with me that 2-drop Goblin is like by far the best card in the deck?
By a mile. The Battlecry Goblin. What a mythic grizzly bear that is.
Yeah.
And that guy's just like no bone crusher. Let's go. Let's go.
That I'll tell you what, crafties, that is like a haymaker in search of a chin to land on, man. Like if we get just a couple more good cards, that could start to be a real deck for sure. Yep.
Agreed. Full agree.
Yep. All right. Well, that's where we're going to put the cap on it for today. We'll continue to report back on this format. We might not have any other massive revelations until actual rotation, but we'll see how it goes. I'm sure CGB and I will continue to be playing it. In the meantime, crafties, you can always find us on Spotify or any of your usual podcatcher platforms. If you're an audio listener, you can always watch the video version on Covert Go Blues YouTube channel. Vice versa, if you're a video watcher, you can always take us on the road with you via any of the platforms that I mentioned earlier. You can also find both of us streaming on Twitch throughout the week, Covert Go Blue very regularly at twitch.tv/Covert Go Blue, me somewhat less regularly at Twitch ArenaCraft Podcast. We also have a Patreon, which is very, very key to some of our recent expansions. So thank you very much, Crafties, for supporting our Patreon. It means a lot to get that cash every month. It really helps us to pay for our wonderful editors, Bottlebrush, Fernando. They're the people who actually do the hard work to make this podcast digestible. And Covert Go Blue, I feel like next time we chat, we'll probably be covering some more spoilers or maybe doing a little bit more historic discussion. And in the meantime, CGB, don't get hit by lightning, bro.
Dude, I can't take another 3 to the face, man. I'm pretty low. I can't take another 3. But thanks for all the support. I'm glad we still got to do this. And later, crafties.
Later, crafties.